The best defense is a good offense. Working together is the best strategy. At school, we are taught to work in groups. We are taught that working together is a positive activity to be encouraged, and that its villainous opposite, a selfish desire to work alone, is to be discouraged. Military alliance is a philosophy and are related to collective security systems but can differ in nature. While a collective security arrangement is directed against no one, it is directed solely against aggression. It seeks not to influence any shifting balance of power, but to strengthen the balance of principle. Let's take example. NATO and the Warsaw Pact had clear-cut beliefs, which contributed their durability. In other side, China, Russia, Iran and Pakistan have little in common in culture or ideology. The only belief they share is anti-Americanism, but that is not much to go on. Here the most important question is, will attempts to build a new anti-America alliance by China fail? If yes, why? Let's discuss. In the last 30 years of unchallenged dominion has enabled the US to establish a network of alliances spanning the globe on its NATO, AUKUS, Quad or major non-NATO allies, which is essential to Washington's foreign policy. On the contrary, China has made extreme efforts to stay away from military alliances, prefer to go with disinterestedness and non-intervention. But the things are very different now than they used to be. The strife over the reliance of Asia Pacific is strengthened and China is now considering a valid defense umbrella of its own. Something similar to NATO and even better, which is Warsaw Pact. Allowing for regular military exchanges and joint exercises, China has exalted its correlation with Russia, Iran and Pakistan in the last few years. In spite of the fact that no joint defense treaty has been signed between them, still China is laying the foundation for an pact along the line. When this happens, it is going to be targeted a critical moment in the American-Chinese rivalry and define the future of the international communities. But the military alliances are very difficult to establish. This is not everything for all countries. China is the hardest country to get by with. Its policy making comes with unwanted and inconvenient requirements. For a Chinese-based security alliance to work, its members should act like a series, proficient, tough, and still versatile. There should be no opponents. An alliance is a group of countries, political parties, or people who have agreed to work together because of shared interests or aims. Usually, an alliance is formed between nation states and their proxies in order to wage war against common adversaries. So they unite their resources and forces to overcome the existing state of affairs. Over the last 20 years, China has developed considerably military competence of its own. Stimulated by its newfound strength, it has been able to strike around India along the disputed border, dominating Taiwan at sea and in the air and spreads its jurisdiction claims in the South China Sea, and yet China has declined to take on external security commitments. Satellite imagery has shown China's increased efforts to reclaim land in the South China Sea by physically increasing the size of islands or creating new islands altogether. Foreign aid, trade, and policies governing the international flow of capital can be used as foreign policy tools and are considered the most common forms of economic statecraft. China doesn't want to get trapped into any kind of conflicts, preferring to advance its objectives through economic statecraft. In importance to Asia, Africa, and even Europe, China has offered loans, investments, and trade deals regardless of the track records at home. By doing so, China has won friends and supremacy across the globe. At times it has been utilized to compulsion to get its way, but from a grand perspective, China's economic statecraft has been a success. So for geoeconomics cannot solve everything. Military power is needed to endure oppression from the United States. With that in mind, Chinese policymakers are looking to create a nexus of allies just as United States and Soviet Union created rival military blocs in 1950s. In June 1950, the first military action of the Cold War began when the Soviet-backed North Korean People's Army invaded its pro-Western neighbor to the south. Many American officials feared this was the first step in a communist campaign to take over the world and deemed that non-intervention was not an option. The need for an alliance is consistent with China's rapid growth, but it is a difficult task after everything. Most of the world's advanced economies are already allied with the United States, so the list of glittering as observer states. While Cambodia, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Armenia, Azerbaijan and Turkey make for dialogue partners. That is quite a list, but the Shanghai Pact is no military alliance. The SCO is governed by the heads of State Council, its supreme decision-making body, which meets once a year. Military exercises are also regularly conducted among members to promote cooperation and coordination against terrorism and other external threats, and to maintain regional peace and stability. The members of the Shanghai Pact have shown no inclination to expand the organization beyond their responsibilities. So, China's security umbrella will have to come from somewhere else. The most viable way to go about this is by forming bilateral defense clauses. Cambodia, Laos, Nepal, as well as the Pacific Island nations, that is, Kiribati, Vanuatu, and the Solomons are some that would look favorable to an alliance with China. Topping the list, however, are Russia, Iran, and Pakistan. Each has extraordinary means and resources and had extraordinary dealings with Beijing. So, starting with Russia, in 2019, Moscow and Beijing upgraded their association to a comprehensive strategic partnership, and the two have been more aligned at any point since the mid-1950s. Putin and Jinping have met nearly 30 times throughout their political professions, indicating a stark correlation at the executive level. Public perceptions are the complementary as well. A poll conducted by China's Global Times showed that over 50% of Chinese population viewed Russia as the most important country in foreign policy, while a poll by the US-based PEO Research Center showed that 71% of Russians holding favorable opinions of China. In spite of the political and public attitudes, a binding treaty remains beyond reach. China's economy is 10 times that of Russia, and China's military budget overshadows Russian spending by more than $227 billion. In the case of a military alliance, Russia would clearly take a backseat in policy making. That is a disturbing prospect, especially in the view of region's demographics. The Russian Far East is underpopulated, and some 3 lakh to 5 lakh ethnic Chinese already inhabit the area. There may yet come a time when Beijing asks Moscow to concede territory. As the junior partner in a binding treaty, Russia would have no means of refusing. This then is the reason for Russia's reluctance to sign a binding mutual defense clause with China. Russian and Chinese policymakers could still strike a deal on mutual aid and logistical support, but the shaky history between the two will stop short of a defense treaty. Now, let's discuss about Iran. With Iran, the story is a bit different. In March 2021, Beijing and Tehran signed a 25-year partnership agreement, which pledges to deepen intelligence sharing, weapons development, and joint military exchanges, but also fortify cybersecurity and economic investments. Iran has almost no strategic allies owing to its sponsorship of proxy conflicts across the Middle East. By its own actions, Tehran is isolated to the point of economic ruin. The Iranian leadership is desperate for economic and military support, and Chinese see that desperation as an opportunity to exploit Iran's constrained bargaining power. With the new agreement in place, China will steadily develop a strong bridgehead in Iran. However, as much as Iranian lawmakers would like to see a mutual defense clause with China, it is not having it. Iran is a state that brings a lot of geopolitical burdens. An alliance with Iran would necessitate China to degrade its ties with Israel and Arab states, basically giving up all the Middle East. Moreover, it would encourage even more careless decision making by Tehran, which could drag China into remote conflicts where it would benefit next to nothing. This is not the type of ally China is looking for. That said, Iran does have an exceptional strategic use. It displaces American resources away from China's proximity. The more the US naval fleets are preoccupied with Iran, the more space Beijing has to maneuver in the South China Sea. So, while China plans to deepen its military ties with Iran, a formal alliance is unlikely. Now, the number 3 country is Pakistan. Pakistan is another capable candidate as a nuclear-armed nation of some 225 million people. It would make for a valuable ally. It boasts a formidable military that can hold its own, and by allying with Pakistan, China could reinforce its access to the Indian Ocean, allowing it to bypass the maritime choke points in the South China Sea. In recent years, Islamabad has come to rely on Beijing for everything from technology transfers to coronavirus vaccines. In March 2022, for instance, Pakistan commissioned its first batch of Chinese J-10C fighter aircraft into its air force. However, progress has come at a cost. The Chinese-American rivalry is heating off, and Pakistan is stuck in the middle. Islamabad's relationship with Washington has always been brittle. Even at the best of times, Pakistan played an instrumental role during the Cold War and again during the War on Terror. Now, however, bilateral ties are at a crossroads. Pakistan has no lasting place in US foreign policy, and its importance fluctuates according to Washington's interest in the region. Likewise, Pakistan doesn't know how much it can develop its ties with China without harming its links to the United States. As such, there is a disagreement among Pakistani policymakers. They need to ally with the global force to maintain the power balance with Arkan India, but Islamabad feels stuck and unable to move ahead. So while Beijing's outreach to Islamabad will grow in the coming decade, especially in arms deals, Pakistan will be slow to come around. Nevertheless, of all possible allies, Pakistan tops the list as the most practical. All things considered, China's growing military capabilities are great, and all but to magnify its power projection, it needs formal alliances. But choosing from a selection of strategic states is not enough. Strategy must be supplemented with ideology. History shows that a steadfast military alliance needs a common philosophy to glue its members into a collective mission, something to justify its existence. NATO and Warsaw Pact had clear-cut beliefs which contributed to their durability. China, Russia, Iran, and Pakistan have little in common in culture or ideology. The only belief they share is anti-Americanism, but that is not much to go on. Now, No state can act sagacious and simultaneously in every part of the globe at every moment of time. A military alliance of its own would transform China into a global force to be gauged with. But it needs a common philosophy. It doesn't need to be anything sophisticated, just enough to substantiate the existence of the proposed bloc. A military alliance doesn't mean love any more than war means hate. So, guys, this was for today. Give us your thoughts on this in the comment section. And if you appreciate our content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with your family and friends. We'll meet soon in a new video. Thank you. Jai Hind.